We build cities like beavers build beaver dams, you know? The way the world we inhabit is in dialogue with the worlds we have in our heads. You're putting a selective filter on your vision that prevents you from seeing the world at all as it is. Part of what makes that up is human thought and animal thought pitched towards similar ends.
Hello, welcome to Anastrophes, a podcast series where we walk and talk with thinkers, ecologists, artists, designers, and those at the forefront of environmental struggle. If a catastrophe is things falling apart, then each episode of Anastrophes is a convergence, a moment of coming together. Through these walking conversations, we collect stories of key moments of change within their practice, each one a marker of where our guests have been and where they're heading next. In this episode, I walk and talk with Tim Waterman, Associate Professor of Landscape Theory at the Bartlett School of Architecture, UCL. We discuss watersheds, queer ecologies, the imagination, and much more. I hope you enjoy.
You can usually figure out a city pretty quickly in terms of the distribution of rich and poor if you understand that shit flows downhill. So anyone that's downstream and downwind is probably impoverished. Here, you get that in microcosm. So,
Yes.
Just to our left, the Hammersmith and City line, which was usually done as a cut and cover, Metropolitan Line, Hammersmith and City, here is just left open. The land wasn't valuable enough here to enclose it.
To enclose it.
Are you, have you read an essay by J.B. Jackson called The Stranger's Path? It's quite a famous essay, and it talks about basically the route into town. So King's Cross is where people come into town. It's a transient zone.
Yeah.
Right. So I always think that railway stations and bus stations have the seeds of decline kind of built in, because everything, and J.B. Jackson uses the wonderful word honky tonk. He says these places tend to go honky tonk. So you find flop houses and brothels and gambling joints.
Which is what King's Cross was known for.
Yeah. 20 years ago, you could, at 6 a.m, stand in front of King's Cross Station and find a streetwalker.
Yeah.
Well, not just one, but several.
Yeah. Well, before we get too carried away with our walking, could you introduce yourself?
I am Tim Waterman. I'm Professor of Landscape Theory at the Bartlett School of Architecture, UCL. I study imagination.
Okay.
So I am interested in the way the world we inhabit is in dialogue with the worlds we have in our heads. So that includes the design imagination, it includes the literary and filmic imagination, it includes the imagination of where we want to be, sort of striving and ambition in society.
Yeah.
So taste and taste making are all part of that. I kind of see myself as having selected a whole variety of things that people look down on in order to make real meaning from them. So utopias, people are like, oh no, you can't really talk about that in academia, and food and taste, not quite serious.
Yeah.
At the moment I'm writing about laughter and its place in philosophy. So I think I like to choose those unpopular woolly topics and then...
So keep going as we talk.
Yeah.
Laughter is a really interesting point to start with. Your writing is very fun and transgressive, and I think in academia, to be funny is somehow frowned upon. And I think one thing that really interests me with this series, where we're walking, where we're kind of we're not sitting in symposia or writing essays, we're just kind of walking and talking. How you find that kind of like playing with the rules, So you work in like traditional registers, like you're a professor, you publish essays, etc. But you clearly have a sense of humor about it. And how you find living in the academy and kind of toying with it at the same time.
I think because I'm working in landscape, which is a kind of outsider field anyway.
Yeah.
I probably have more latitude. It's broadly interdisciplinary. It involves people from, archaeology, anthropology, planning, geography, you name it. And ultimately, landscape is a way of talking about relationships, about the way in which places make us and the way that we make places. So everyday life is actually an important part of that discussion. And everyday life is actually pretty funny.
Which way are we going?
We're going to head up the rise here. You'll note we've got
Vernon Rise.
Okay. This one is Penton Rise, and this is Weston Rise.
Okay.
So
Vernon, I associate that word with America. Mount
as in
Vernon.
sort of Mount Vernon.
And it's a name as well. Right?
I don't know where this name comes from, but I think what you're seeing here is actually really interesting. That as we get just a few meters of elevation here, relatively quickly, we're moving out of the low-lying, marshy, mildewy, cold, damp,
the London clay, and,
impoverished area into, and you can see here at Percy Circus, the houses are looking nicer.
They are looking nice. The rent is higher, I can tell you.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting in terms of like scales of landscape, and in one of your writings talk about like the different scales of ecology, and I mean it's all-encompassing term. Landscape as well as all-encompassing. So within the St Pancras area or King's Cross, I never know which is the correct name. One of the two. I think
they all apply.
Yeah.
I think of St Pancras as being more towards the old church.
Yeah,
and
the old
Camley
St
Street.
Pancras Church. Yeah, where the fleet runs by. But within this microcosm of this parish, you still have the rich and the poor, the upstream, the downstream, the upwind, the downwind, and then that applies to London on a macro scale as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of this I suppose, sort of fractal element to it. And landscape architecture has that kind of question of scale, which I find really interesting.
I tend to think of landscape as having nested scales.
Nested scales.
So, we can talk about Percy Circus here as a landscape. We can talk about King's Cross as a landscape. We can talk about all of central London as having a particular character and set of relationships. And, you can keep scaling up until you're talking about the Thames estuary and the whole of the watershed. And this is something I just wanted to show you here. So the sign that we're looking at on the corner of this building in Percy Circus says Bartlett Surgeon Accoucheur.
Okay.
Now, I think we know for a fact that Bartlett was male.
Yeah.
And that accoucheur means that he was probably a midwife.
Wow.
So a male midwife. But probably what that also means in this neighborhood with extreme poverty just right there, one street away, and prostitution and everything else, is probably this was also an abortionist.
Yeah.
Living slightly better than the people
Yeah.
that he was treating.
But nonetheless, kind of reliant on us. We talk about kind of levels of society reliant on the underclass in order to sustain himself, maybe in a better way.
Yeah.
That is so interesting.
And at the time that Bartlett would have plied his trade here, this circus was already getting a bit honky-tonk again. So the houses were starting to be divided up with lodgers.
Yeah.
There were, low-lifes like musicians living here.
God forbid.
Yeah. So it was all getting a bit mixed at that time. Now, of course, you're looking at it, and some of the buildings are pastiche because they were bombed and rebuilt. These ones over
kind
here.
of yellow brick.
But then we also have the designs by Bertolt Lubetkin for modernist housing.
That's a Lubetkin there?
That's a Lubetkin there, yeah.
Wow, okay.
Which has quite an amazing central stair.
Yeah, it has these kind of like V-shaped stairs. The one in
they're kind of radiating out. They're quite remarkable. And then these on this side are original.
Originals,
But the bombs in the Second World War flattened a lot of this. And there was a square just over here. I forget the Holcroft. I can't quite remember.
It's just gone.
Yeah, there's a square that's just gone, and Lenin lived there.
Ah, okay.
So that actually also points to the politics of the area.
Yeah.
So a really
But also the lodging house and the precariat nature of the area too, right?
Yeah. A really, really well-to-do area probably wouldn't have been
Yeah.
communist and anarchist in its character, but this
Yeah.
neighborhood was.
Yeah.
So I think that also shows just how kind of mixed it was.
I see. Should we?
Yeah, let's head up
Yeah.
Great Percy Street.
I'd love to see a survey of the different circuses of London, because I think it's an interesting kind of datum point. Obviously, you've got Piccadilly, like Arnold Circus,
Cambridge Circus, Oxford
Cambridge Circus. Yeah, the out west-ish, I think.
Of course, most of them have lost their circusness.
Yeah,
So Percy Circus is one of the few that really is still a proper circus.
so I mean, circus is circular,
Yeah.
and is it just a green, like a common green in the centre?
I mean, it's just basically a roundabout.
Yeah, which is I think roundabouts are an interesting ecology, kind of a micro island of their own, aren't they?
Yeah.
Hey. Oh, I didn't know that was a Lebetkin. That's interesting. But also make me think about that Bartlett.
Holford, sorry, not Holcroft.
Okay,
There's Holcroft Court in Fitzrovia. This is Holford.
yeah. But also thinking about the kind of male midwife title there, and the work of like Silvia Federici, talking about the role of landscape and misogyny, and the persecution of witches in her Caravan of a Witch. So you enclose land and then you begin to enclose women's bodies.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think that like it's a kind of, I don't want to say miracle, but it's a surprise that midwife is a title again after that campaign, because the midwife wasn't one of the people designated as a witch
Yeah.
and seen as transgressing the capitalist order.
Yeah, because a midwife was a woman with knowledge
Woman of, yeah,
and capacity, and probably also had rank. So the order was kind of pitched against the female body and towards creating these kind of heteropatriarchal forms in the landscape as well, which we see reflected in architecture, of course.
You mean hetero forms of a landscape in terms of a kind of like phallocentric, or?
I think what we would see as masculine forms of operating, clearing, dominating,
Yeah, kind of
simplifying.
cutting wood and hewing water and.
Yeah, I mean, not to say that women didn't do that.
No.
But there is a way in which landscapes become kind of voided of nuance. And nuance you could see as a kind of feminine quality
Yes.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah, but kind of sterilization. But it's also, I think, why urban ecology is so interesting to me, which is, we'll get on to kind of queer ecology, but the messiness is innate, because just as you were talking about with train stations, there's always movement.
Yeah.
You can't sterilize these landscapes because there's too much going on.
Well, here's an example of the movement of this neighborhood. This little house here, double-fronted house number 69, was here before the rest of the neighborhood
Okay.
was. So you have to be able to picture this in, say, 1820, surrounded by fields, but maybe with the roads
Yeah.
just being laid out.
Yeah.
The rest of the development here was in and around the 1850s.
Yeah. I think that's something that people don't always like. David Olasoga, I think I might be saying his surname wrong there, but I remember seeing him talk about how often plots would be laid out before the map preceded the territory, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a kind of cadastral ghost that
Yes,
appears
yeah.
before the.
Yeah.
Oh,
Easy.
I should quickly point out that we just walked up a street called River Street, which is bizarre actually, because we are at the top of the slope.
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
just now looking down into
Yeah.
King's Cross. But it's actually named for the New River, which was built as an aqueduct to bring water in from Hertfordshire. And unfortunately, we can't get in here anymore. And you can see they're working on it at the moment.
Is this for Quentin Blake? Yeah.
But this is where the entry to the New River Head
Yeah.
is. So this was the reservoir where the water was collected and distributed. And that was built in the 1600s.
It's one of the first major canal projects.
Yeah.
Of Britain. I mean, there was major canal projects in the kind of Indus Valley for millennia, but this kind of idea of importing water to the city and the city not self-sustaining itself, I find really interesting. I was actually thinking about the night walkers, that's what it's called, or is it night crops?
Is this the Matthew Beaumont book that you're thinking about?
I think, and the practice generally. So like a lot of the streets around Clerkenwell, which we're kind of oblique to now, like they'll be called things like, I forget the names now, but like they're basically where the poo used to be piled up.
Yeah.
And then people would come in from the countryside, collect the poo, use it as fertilizer.
Night soil.
Night soil, that's it, night soil. And so in many ways there was an ecological relationship whereas now, say, our grapes are flown in from Madagascar or wherever they're flown in from. It used to be that the waste product of the agriculture would go and sustain the next crop of agriculture.
And they would go into what were called hotbeds, right? So you have the biological working of the night soil in the compost.
Yeah.
Heating up those beds, so it speeds up the growth of the plants and allows you to grow things out of season as well.
Oh, really? So kind of an actual sort of terraforming?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so interesting.
And oftentimes you had farmers building microclimates with that as well. So in and around Paris, there were structures called fruit walls. So the landscape was crisscrossed with all of these walls.
Yes.
Which allowed for soft fruit to be grown. Apricots,
in Chiswick
peaches.
House, they still have some of these walls. They have their melon garden, yeah. It's kind of like triangular. That's interesting. I never made the connection. They sort of look a lot like the sort of planning of the Garden of Versailles, that kind of formalist garden. I wonder if they're...
Yeah, because they're following an agricultural paradigm.
Yeah.
They're it's easiest to lay them out in grids. Now, you mentioned going to get the mineral spring water.
Yes.
As far as I know, Sadler's Wells still has a well.
Really?
They used to sell the water. I don't know if they still do. But this whole route up to Islington was basically spas and pleasure palaces. This is where you would come out of the city to have a good time.
Yeah.
And to our right here, we have Lubetkin's Spa Green estate. So Spa Green, again, referencing the historic uses of this area. I should just show you actually here. I love this detail. So this tiled band along the base of the building sits just slightly out from the actual foundation, which leaves the whole building appearing to kind of float
sort
at
of
this corner.
Yeah.
It's really a lovely.
But it's also interesting, kind of how he must have been navigating this space. Like, you had I'm sure you have to talk to architects from that era, and they talk about how they'd have their 5 books of Le Corbusier on their desk. Yeah. And that's what you go to, so he's got the Pilottis in here. He's getting the tick on his Le Corbusier check sheet here, but he had to go uphill
and this is actually quite an early design. This was begun before the Second World War and finished, I think, somewhere around 1948.
This is begun pre-war?
Wow. This is a pre-war design.
Oh, yeah, and you can see the colouring
and at the top,
yeah.
You can just see what are called wind roofs. So they were drying areas for laundry, and thus, of course, female social spaces.
Yeah, together. Yeah. I'd like to talk about queer ecology as we walk around. First of all, it's a term that I feel is being used a lot right now. I think it's having a bit of a moment.
It is.
How do you define it?
And it's being used pretty fast and loose in a lot of cases as well.
And I think it's always interesting when this happens to words. Anthropocene is another one, Mormon human is another one. These terms which are important and key, but get kind of used flippantly. I used to live in that building just over there, Rawsthorne Street. That was a accommodation for brewers. So it was all single bedrooms with kitchenettes and stuff off from them. So for single men who worked in the breweries.
That's all part of the watery history of this area, because you had the availability of fresh water and the fleet, which basically acted as a sewer for taking the wastewater away, which meant that you had breweries and slaughterhouses and all sorts of industry along here, and then the working class housing that accompanied that.
Yeah.
And the working class politics.
And the working class
politics
yeah.
that went with
Which
it.
still kind of retained. I mean, this is I'm not sure which constituency we're in now, but as you go northwards from here, it's still strongly, Jeremy Corbyn's been elected. It's still, for other council levels, still very socialist. I don't think we're in his constituency right now.
I think we're in Islington still here.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell because the council names don't kind of attach to anything.
No.
Really
No.
anymore.
Well, they're kind of taken from parishes and extrapolated. But yeah, so how would you define queer ecology?
Okay, I don't think you can talk about ecology itself as being queer in any way. Queerness is a human construct. It has to do with difference and the identification of difference. And I think queering, to queer as a verb has a positive side and a negative side. It's to take something that's painfully straight and make it queer, put a wig on it. Or on the other hand, it's to take something that might be like a traditional land use and make it unpleasantly queer. So the dominant power points at something and says, that's queer, smear it.
Yes.
So queer ecology, I think, can refer to places in which humans and human ecology, or human ecology and other ecologies, kind of brush together.
Okay.
Matthew Gandy, in his essay on queer ecology, writes about men having sex in Abney Park Cemetery and spreading around seeds and spores from plants on their clothing as they spread their own seed around the cemetery, which I think is a wonderful kind of way of describing a particular type, and a queer ecology you can point at and say, that's queer happening. The other thing that I think is useful is to apply it. So you could say, for example, that dolphin behavior is queer. Of course it isn't, because it's just dolphin behavior.
Yeah.
But by pointing to the ways in which dolphins have sex, which is really all over the place, like they pick a gender, any gender, pick a hole, any hole, including the blowhole. So dolphins are delightfully pansexual, which of course
which is also to say that within that spectrum that they're inhabiting, there's no alterity, because it's all, there's no queer versus normal.
Yeah, because anything goes.
Anything goes.
As long as it feels good.
As long as it feels good.
We'll be doing that, thank you.
Because you write about how, so queerness is something that is ascribed from humans onto nature, but is also a way for humans to understand nature. I think a lot about those early Walt Disney nature documentaries where they were, it's kind of come out since, they're explicitly Christian. They wanted to show kind of heteronormativity within animals. And so, these are the same videos where the lemmings would be pushed off a cliff, which we all know is now not true.
Yeah.
They would also show the nuclear family in nature, which was again editorialized. So
the fact that you can, and this comes back to my thinking about the imagination.
Yeah.
Right. The worlds in our heads can terribly distort the worlds that we see.
Yeah.
In reality.
Yeah.
So if you think that nature is red in tooth and claw, and the survival of the fittest individual is more important than the survival of the fittest species, and if you think that all animal sex is pitched towards reproduction, which it isn't, and there are all sorts of animal and other organizations have sex and have gender in all sorts of interesting ways, then you're putting a selective filter on your vision that prevents you from seeing the world at all as it is.
Do you think we have a problem with imagination? That's a big question, but I think that the way in which conversations about politics, about ecology are occurring feel often very limited. How do we increase spending on this while not raising taxes, or how do we politically charge this, etc.? I feel like the ability to imagine, even to the extent of the Lebetkin housing estates, which are schemes which have he clearly has agency and ideas being applied in a spatial form. I feel like an imagination is very capped now. And in a pedagogical sense, you are amongst students, you're amongst imagination all day, every day. Do you think imagination is A, capped, or B, in short supply?
Yes, I both. I think that imagination is completely necessary for thinking through scenarios. What if things happen this way? And scenarios are creating kind of holistic worlds in the imagination to think, what if I build things this way? What will happen to the quality of people's lives? That's an ethical and moral realm, because ethics and morals require imagination and scenarios.
Do you think otherwise?
Because ethics ultimately are not like a set of rules that have been written down.
Have you not heard of the 10 Commandments? But it's an active process.
It's an active process.
Yeah.
I like to say that soap operas are a great example of the ethical imagination at work.
Yeah.
Because every time the series returns, there's another ethical dilemma. Bobby Sue is having an affair with Jimmy Joe, or whatever.
Yeah. And it allows us to, it's a way of passively absorbing that imaginative ability to think through. And passive is the wrong word there. It's a way of embodying another experience through someone. Yeah. Which I suppose goes back to the nature thing. Most people aren't living David Attenborough's life. Most people can't go out and see nature as it is. And even, I could argue that for nature, some people like David Attenborough aren't seeing nature as it is because his imagination is certain. He's seeing through his imagination, which is of a man trained under certain things, etc. But that ability to show otherwise is really important in ecology writing, and
this is why I think it's so important to get out for walks with people, just like we're doing,
even in the middle of a storm,
and think about how water flows through things. Yeah. How politics shape spaces. The ability to think of the city as a landscape, as a set of relationships, and maybe also as a set of impositions from dominating points of view, allows us to actually think about the city as nature, and the city as nature. Yeah, the city as human habitat. Right? It's that we build cities like beavers build beaver dams. We are answering our needs for shelter, warmth, conviviality, sex,
through the organization of the city.
Yeah.
I think makes me think of two things. I think of Pecan. I forget his first name. Pecan has a formulation of rationality of reason as being rationality plus imagination. So if rationality is 2 + 2 = 4, and he's saying that's cardinally true, then you have your imagination and you put on top of that, and that creates reason. So when someone says something like we need to colonize the Punjab with canals in order to make productive land because the people there can't do it themselves, the imagination is about being constrained through capitalism, is being constrained through land scarcity logics, and you're applying rationality, which is hydraulics and engineering on top of that, and you create the canal colonies. Or you can apply that to America. Through that lens, John Locke's logic is really clear. We need to make land productive. His imagination is constrained by certain land ideas, plus the reason of how do we actually enclose land. And I think in the city, walking is an interesting way of undoing some of those constraints, because your mind naturally wanders, and you also see the gaps, you see the limitations of things, the cracks between buildings, the those of schemes, the way in which the weeds creep back in. And it also brings me on to Catherine Youssef's concept of inhuman intimacy. And she's applying that often to things like the transatlantic slave trade, but it also applies to the city, which is we live alongside pigeons and rats and other humans. There's nothing more intimate than a tube during rush hour.
Bruno Latour talks about this as the human, non-human combine, right? That part of what makes that up is human thought and animal thought pitched towards similar ends. And I would say too that actually our material world and the agency that objects have to shape our worlds.
Christmas tree. I mean, this is a great point. The object shaping our world. We bring in a tree for 3 weeks or so.
Exactly, and we're participating in a ritual that transcends generations. And
but also taps back into the. I mean, depending on what people follow, you keep your tree up until the wise men have got home or visited first.
I'm sure most people don't even have half a thought for where the custom arose from or what its meanings are. They're just doing it because it's pretty and it smells nice.
Well, it's always. I went to Trafalgar Square maybe the 3rd of January. That was a Sunday. Yeah, I think 3rd or 4th. And it's an interesting space because they always get a tree from Norway. It's like a custom,
yeah.
And the trees, frankly, look bad.
They're always a little
they're
gangly.
skinny, and there's not much. And every year you get Sadiq Khan kind of coming on and defending it because it's this tradition that we've done this, and it's funny, but but this goes back to the capping of imagination. Like in many ways, we're walking through logics right now. We're walking through streets that have been configured around watersheds and around water flows, but also around the movement from a health spring to a brewery to a flow of commerce that then becomes codified into tarmac and concrete.
Yeah.
And we are inheritors of that past imaginations. How as a professor, as someone engaged with students, how do you encourage thinking otherwise?
Well, I teach landscape as a history of ideas. So I do like to take my students out walking. I like to point at artifacts in the street and say how they've arrived.
Do you want to go through Smithfield?
Yeah, we can go through that, but I just want to look down the street here a moment as well.
And we're walking at a particularly interesting moment because the London Museum is not quite finished, but it's going to open this year, I think.
Yeah.
And so just there.
So that's all quite exciting, and I'm thrilled that the market is being preserved in some form. Although I kind of.
But it is closing. The market itself is closing.
Yeah, but the buildings I think will remain. There's a whole different discussion. I think it's crazy, and it adds extra food miles to take the food out of town.
Yeah.
But the one thing I wanted to point here is that clearly we're at the top of a valley here again. And we're looking down into the valley of the Fleet, and that's where the railway is running. So we've just been kind of following that along on the crest of the hill above. This was originally just a smooth field, and that's where Smithfield comes from. And it was
Smith meaning smooth or...
Yeah, it just kind of got corrupted over time. There wasn't a smithy here, or at least that's not where the name comes from. It's just a corruption of Smoothfield.
Yeah. So then we're into which watershed are we this way then? Are we into Walbrook?
Well, we're still looking up in... it's a while before we get to the Walbrook because we still have a little bit of ground to gain. Going up towards Charterhouse Square and the Barbican.
I'm not sure. Have you ever... should we go into the...
Yeah, let's go.
But I suppose this area is in a real flux right now. And you were talking just now about you teach landscape as a history of ideas.
Yeah.
Or how does that come out in practice?
How does it come out?
How do you, to a new student, how do you communicate that? Because I do think, and if I just say explicitly what I'm kind of getting at here, I engage with landscape, I engage with ecology and more than human in my work. I think particularly British, particularly English who are in Britain, have very malnourished concepts of landscape.
Yeah.
I think our inheritance and our ideas of landscape within Europe writ large is a very limited idea about nature being some sort of Eden, and there's a cognitive issue in terms of how we discuss the more rich complexity of landscape.
I think and the way that I define landscape, and I think many others do at this point, is very useful because it contains a contradiction. Landscape is both something. Yeah, this is a wonderful street. We could walk down.
Should we go? Yes, go.
Yeah. Good pubs down here too.
So landscape has a contradiction.
So landscape is something that is a function of the display of power and overpower, domination.
Yeah.
Jill Kasich has a wonderful book called Sowing Empire, which talks about the whole project of colonizing the New World as a landscaping project.
Sowing meaning sowing of seeds.
Yeah.
But it also retains that etymological link.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So there's the very worst of power displayed by landscape as a medium. But it's also where people live. If you talk about landscape as that relationship between people and place, you have everyday lives that are living in landscapes that are expressions of power despite that expression of power.
Yes, yeah.
And far from being a problem for theory, I think it's a real boon because it allows us to think through the contradictions which you find everywhere in everyday life.
Yeah, it's sort of, I mean, one of the reasons I really enjoy walking is work of Pied Noir, and the kind of the idea of two types of history. There is the monuments and the street names and the kind of officialized history, and then there is the embodied history that is through people, through walking, through practice. And some things aren't ever written down, and you can also apply in that second scale. Obviously, it's also decolonial practice, but it's also animals and the non-human.
Yeah.
On writing.
This is Marcus Rediker, who writes about pirates and the transatlantic slave trade and things like that. He calls it history from below.
History from below, yeah, exactly.
And Matt Holbrook's wonderful book, Queer London,
Oh,
pieces together
Yes, yeah.
queer male histories of London through police reports, because the records of those people's lives weren't otherwise retained.
Yeah.
Like their families burned their journals and
Yeah.
their pictures of boys. And
All things were kept hidden. And,
Yeah,
You
exactly.
have the same with adoption records as well. Sometimes who adopted who is kind of a marriage. In legal speak, it ends up being a marriage, but it's an adoption. There's a great book. It's out of print, and I can never find it. I'll put it in the show notes. But I think it's called A Gentleman's Review of Lavatories, and it's
yes.
It's this correspondence between two people. Back when newspapers or magazines had letters, and they're corresponding in the letter section of a magazine about the best toilets in and around this neck of the woods. And it's for cruising sites.
Yes.
It's a beautiful open codedness.
And there were maps done for this as well.
Yeah, there's a map at the front of it.
Actually, in the Secret Maps exhibition in the British Library at the moment, there is exactly one of those.
That's brilliant. It's something that in the next few weeks, I'll send you an invite. Next few weeks I'm doing a walk, well not a walk actually, the beginning is not a walk, about London's lost rivers. And what I'm trying to get at with this, I've obviously covered the Fleet, the Walbrook and Tyburn and blah, blah, blah. But actually a lot of the rivers are lost ideas of rivers. So flow of ideas, lost concepts of access to water, access to flooding and changing conditions. At what point is water free? A lot of lakes and ponds have frozen over this week, but historically the Thames itself would have frozen over.
Yeah.
When it moved much slower because of all the rivers. And then in that setting it was called kind of terra nullius. And you could go gambling and bear fighting and
in the frost fairs.
Yeah, because no one owned the land and therefore no rules applied.
This is interesting because there was also a climatic reason for that.
The Little Ice Age.
The Little Ice Age, which many climate scientists say was the result of massive depopulation as a result of various plagues, the bubonic plague being one, but the plagues of smallpox and such in the New World, which killed off millions. So the reforestation of all of this land that had once been agricultural land caused the earth to cool significantly And so you have, in the sort of Flemish golden age of painting, you have lots of ice skating on canals, and you have the frost fairs. The other landscape or environmental consideration was that London Bridge and its multiple arches slowed the flow of the river.
Yeah. I think it's this kind of, again, we come back to the question of intimacy, that I think especially from a British context, you can sometimes rhetorically think that what happened in the colonies, what happened in empire is separate, but then climactically is following over the transferring of seeds, transferring of people, all these connection points come back through, and I think that question of like how do we think otherwise is really key to that. We're used to thinking of these small landscapes, our local communities, but you were saying earlier about kind of nested landscapes, and we need to kind of jump between the local, the national, which many people seem to take a lot of, we're trained to have a lot of comfort in the national landscape scale, and now beyond that as well.
Yeah, we need to be able to do a kind of trombone slide between the local and the planetary.
I like that.
So it's.
Should we go this way past?
Yeah, we can do that. So it's. Should we cross first or? So it's not about this kind of two-stage process of think globally, act locally. It is actually moving between those two things all the time.
Oscillating. I think this is a good moment to ask you the question of the podcast, which is, if a catastrophe is things falling apart, then we define in our series a catastrophe as things coming together, moment of convergence or clarity or change. And cool motorbike. In your own work, in your own practice, in your own life, what is your catastrophe?
Well, it starts with a catastrophe.
You're playing with the rules.
In the late 90s, I owned a restaurant in a small town, a university town called Moscow, Idaho.
Okay.
And the restaurant went bankrupt.
Okay.
So there is, I can't tell you how psychologically devastating it is to go bankrupt and feel that you've failed people in your community and everything else. And there's a lot of lying and deception that happens in the process of going bankrupt. Because you lie to yourself about whether you're going to make it or not. So denial is incredibly powerful. So after the restaurant closed, I bought an old pickup truck and some tools and started doing gardens and house painting and odd jobs and things like that. And at some point I realized that I couldn't, kind of carry equipment around for the rest of my life, that eventually my body wouldn't be capable of that. So I needed to kind of skill up. And I went back to university for landscape architecture. And I thought when I went for that degree that I was just going to be doing, gardens and that kind of thing. That was my understanding of what landscape architecture was at that point in time, and that attracted me. But then the larger understanding of landscape as relationships kind of brought everything together for me. My past as a writer and a musician, my past as...
Do you play the trombone?
No. I really should, shouldn't I? No,
It becomes this moment of convergence through practice.
Yeah. And so it's, everything I learned about community and participation and living on the high street, that kind of thing from being in the restaurant, it all came together around the theme of landscape. So it's kind of, we're going to have to... cross illegally here. So that's I think is probably my...
And you've stuck with it, landscape.
I've stuck with it. I haven't necessarily stuck with landscape architecture, despite the fact that I teach on a landscape architecture program. I think of myself as someone who uses landscape as a much larger tool for thinking.
Well, this is a thank you. That was That's a brilliant anastrophe. And I think, like you said, you're within pedagogy, and then people whose lives you touch through education go off into practice and into the instrumentalized versions of landscape architecture. So, the disciplines. And someone who studied architecture, but I'm now an artist. I'm not against practice. I'm not, I don't see practice inherently evil, but of course practice is got certain issues and you have to work on certain constraints. And how do you see your role within that? We've walked past countless schemes where people who are landscape architects will have touched.
Go down that way, or?
Yeah, sure. Through Revit or through Vectorworks, and they've designed schemes and etc. How, as a trickle down of the ideas that you try and teach and espouse and challenge people on, how do you think about that?
Well, I think when I was working as a landscape architect, I worked as a landscape architect, urban designer, and worked in urban strategy at the central London scale.
Okay.
I felt like my work as a designer could make the world a better place. Mm-hmm. But as someone who is educating, I feel like I'm able to kind of magnify that.
Yes.
So in my writing and speaking and teaching, I try to show students examples of places where landscape architects and architects have been activists for creating better forms of making projects and neighborhoods and communities. I mean, a bit like Lubetkin.
Yes.
And really trying to put the idea in their heads that it's their job to reinvent what happens in the architectures, because what we do is pretty broken.
Do you have hope?
I do. I think partially that hope is a little bit born of catastrophe as well. Mm-hmm. I think we are going to have to rearrange the worlds in our heads because climate change is irreversible. And we will not in our dotage be living in the same world we currently occupy.
Yes, and thinking back to talking about the Europe in the Little Ice Age, I was going to say Little Dark Age. I think we're in the Little Dark Age now.
We might be in the Little Dark Age.
I think that's what James Bridle calls it, or New Dark Age. Do you already see currents of how things are going to change? So, someone asked me yesterday, what is the legacy of COVID in our day-to-day lives? And the conversation went on for the whole tube journey. We didn't really have a good answer. I'm wondering, obviously it's always fanciful to look forward, look as a futurist, but do you see ingredients of change in landscape and configuration of living already from climate change?
Yes, definitely. And certainly there are parts of the world that are already radically reconfiguring because of... I think we will need solidarity. Mm-hmm. We need togetherness and the ability to work and think together. We need to get away from this idea that we've evolved from the strongest individual and begin to understand once more that we act as a species. I think there are approaches to architecture and design which are wonderful to look at as well. There's a really developing field of what I call design by management, where you actually start by just working with the place.
Mm-hmm. Could you name an example?
I love to point to Martí Frank's work in Girona in Catalonia, where he, in the 2008 economic crash, he didn't have any work. He went to the municipality and said, "Can I hang out with the maintenance crews?" And what he did in that process is, instead of creating a master plan for Girona, he created an action plan on the ground and created ultimately a design which is larger than most master planning ambition would be. He created connected green infrastructure for the whole city of Girona.
And because it starts from the ground up, rather
Yeah.
than the top down.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
actually thinking through place rather than imposing a model on that place.
I think I kind of, back to the COVID question, like, it does seem like many of the seeds maybe sprouted here with the crash. You know, changing configuration, a lot of assemble, forensic architecture to an extent, coming out as a response to there's no work, so you might as well work differently.
We learned so much from COVID, and I think it's really telling just how quickly the powers that be wanted us to put everything back in the box the way it was before.
Well, the Bruno Latour quote, I think it's one of the last things we did before he died, like talking about within a week, we demonstrated that we can completely upend all existing systems. We can furlough everyone, we can effectively nationalize. In the US,
we can house the homeless,
we can house the homeless.
Yeah.
And
we can suspend capitalism.
We can suspend capitalism. But I'm not sure if it's just the elites who want us to forget this. I think we have also wanted to forget COVID wholesale.
Yeah.
And so...
Yeah, because it's this weird, squishy place in our memories.
Yeah. And look, the reason why I'm walking with you and other people is because I don't want to be on Zoom. You know, I don't want that app in my life ever. Full stop. But it means that radical potential is also lost.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it's kind of a bit of a tragedy.
Well, Zoom and other programs like it, definitely not Teams because it's so horrible.
When I did the talk at the beginning of December and we have Teams catastrophes.
Yeah, it just doesn't work.
No. But it's also a way, again, like, because this is something that I do think goes unmentioned a lot in radical progressive landscape stuff, which that place-basedness also has a dark side. Has a, the origins of fascism are also about locality.
Yeah.
And the ability to... So now with this street, as I understand it, is effectively...
The Fleet.
The Fleet, yeah. As is lost, yeah. Ludgate Circus, another circus.
The problem with all this tech, now, it has kept me connected to a cosmopolitan community around the world. And I do try to run hybrid events because it's so important for accessibility. People who have children, people who have disabilities, can attend events, and I think that's miraculous. So the problem now is, how do we own that tech again?
Yes.
How do we achieve digital sovereignty and get away from the tech bro overlords who are increasingly in bed with contemporary fascism?
Yes. And it's interesting because a lot of early internet rhetoric is about, physical space, 68 riots, physical space has been lost to the capitalists. The digital space can be owned by the people.
Yeah.
And that is categorically, in the bin. Unfortunately,
it's happening though. I mean, we have all the platforms. We've got Linux. We've got the Fediverse. We've got, all the tools we need are at hand, and all people need to do is start using them. So I think we can get there, and
do you think the same radical politics that are applied to landscape need to start thinking through cyberspace as well?
Yeah, because our landscapes and cyberspace are now mutually constituted.
Yeah.
They are interpenetrating, they act upon one another, and our digital imaginations and our physical imaginations of the world that we inhabit with our sensoriums are together. Gayatri Spivak wrote in her essay on planetarity, she says the globe is not on our computers, and actually it is.
Yeah.
There is a kind of three-dimensional, even almost multi-sensory world.
I mean, I'm sure we both looked at our Google Maps in order to think through this route a little bit.
Yeah.
And it becomes,
of course.
Yeah. But and then again, I think, and that's a really nice, I do love this area for its constant activity. I think people sometimes talk about London's lost rivers as like a tragedy that we've lost, but it's kind of an ongoing theatre. This street has probably had a construction act on it every day since since embankmenting first took place. But I think mapping, reclaiming mapping as a radical tool. So landscape, and we talk about it as an act of empire, but it's also being used as an act of transgression. We can use maps to plan and understand things and hold truth to power
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
All of these tools can be inverted.
definitely. And there's all sorts of radical mapping that's going on. Citizen science, participatory GIS, all of these kinds of things, which again also give me hope. You know what? Not only have we ended at the river, we've ended at one of London's best pubs.
I was thinking this. Are you free for a pint?
Yes, I think a pint is absolutely in
why
order.
don't we leave a record there? Is there anything you'd like to close with?
It's wow. I've got a picture of a pint in my mind
It's like
now,
when
and
you're
all of
hungry and
a
it starts
sudden,
looking like a steak.
no. I maybe though standing here in front of the Blackfriar, and maybe to pick up again, just finally on this conversation about COVID, is that I think one of the things that COVID really showed us is that we're not, as a species, built for working 60-hour weeks. And we're not, as a species, built for penitential existences. That conviviality, pleasure, togetherness, laziness is all part of what makes us the humans that we are. So if we want to be better humans, we need to probably find beautiful places like this, palaces, temples to pleasure, and inhabit them.
Where was Karl Marx most of the day?
In the pub.
He was in the pub. Okay, right, let's leave that. Thank you.
Great, excellent.
Okay, let's just unlapel that.
Yep.
This is always so funny to me, but
The outro. Thank you for listening to Anastrophes. This episode was hosted by Christie Swallow and edited by Ava Shia, with assistance from Aya El Khoury and Marie Lehman. Sound design by Kaylin Shu.